Welcome to the African Strata, where every layer tells a new story. Support the channel. Like, subscribe, and share for more real African stories.
100,000 people. That's the number we're told flooded the streets of Burkina Faso, armed not with protest signs, but with brooms. They cleared 400 kilometers of drainage, removed over 8,000 tons of waste, planted tens of thousands of trees. And all of it, we're told, happened without orders, without funding, without foreign aid. But come on, when was the last time an entire country suddenly decided to do something en masse without a push? We're talking about a nation that, for decades, lived with trash piling knee-high in markets, mosquito breeding drains left untouched for years, and a culture where people learned to wait. Wait for government trucks, wait for aid, wait for someone else to fix it. And then, overnight, it changes? No official program, no logistics plan, no media blitz ahead of time? Are we really supposed to believe this was pure grassroots action? Or is there a carefully managed story here, one that's been tidied up just like the streets? The official tale starts with one sentence from President Ibrahim Traoré. If you don't sweep your own doorstep, don't expect others to respect your nation. It's catchy, fits perfectly on a headline, but history's full of leaders delivering similar rallying cries, most of them forgotten within a week. So what made this one different? Was it the timing, the messenger? Or was there something happening behind the scenes that the public was never told? Think about it. Mobilizing 100,000 people in a matter of days requires coordination, tools, transportation, a shared schedule. Where did the brooms come from? Who decided which streets to tackle first? Who collected the trash after it was swept into piles? Those details don't magically fall into place. And here's the uncomfortable question. If there was government or military involvement in orchestrating this, why package it as spontaneous? Is it because the real goal wasn't just clean streets, but a clean narrative, one that paints the nation and its leader as rising together in unity, without admitting how much of that rise was staged? The images went viral fast. Crowds of people, some in flip-flops, others in military fatigues, sweeping streets and hauling debris. In the markets of Zogona and Larlé, heaps of rotting trash disappeared almost overnight, replaced with flowers and freshly painted walls. In Gawa, soldiers traded rifles for shovels, wading into muck that had been sitting for years. It looked like a textbook example of unity. But let's slow down. Large-scale mobilization like this doesn't happen by accident. Someone had to spread the word. How exactly did that happen? There's no sign of a nationwide announcement, no official decree, yet whole regions moved in sync. That smells less like organic buzz and more like quiet coordination. And then there's the question of participation. In a country where criticizing the government can carry real risks, how voluntary is it to join a high-profile public campaign led, directly or indirectly, by the president? Did everyone pick up a broom out of pure civic pride, or were some just making sure they weren't seen as the ones who stayed home? When you strip away the feel-good gloss, you're left with something harder to define. A movement, yes, but one that might have more strings attached than anyone is admitting. Official reports claim that in just 1 month, over 400 kilometers of drainage were cleared, 8,000 tons of waste removed, and tens of thousands of trees planted. Impressive, if true. But where do these numbers come from? Are they independently verified? Or are we just taking the government's word for it? Let's break that down. Clearing 400 kilometers of drainage would require not just manpower, but tools, transportation for debris, and safe disposal sites. Who provided those? If they came from the government or military, then this wasn't purely citizen-led. If they didn't, where did the waste go? And is anyone tracking whether it's just been dumped elsewhere? The tree planting figures raise their own questions. How many of those trees will survive the first dry season? Were they native species suited to the environment, or fast-growing imports chosen to pad statistics? It's easy to put big numbers in a press release. It's harder to prove long-term impact. And until someone independent takes a hard look, we can't know if this was the start of lasting change or just a photo-friendly sprint that leaves the deeper problems untouched. Inside Burkina Faso, the reactions have been split, and not in the way the official narrative suggests. Yes, there are videos of residents smiling as they sweep, children planting trees, and market traders proudly showing off their clean stalls. But there's also a quieter, less publicized side of the story. Some residents welcomed the change, saying it brought back a sense of pride they hadn't felt in years. Elders in particular remembered the first Saturday tradition from decades ago when neighborhoods would clean together, not because they had to, but because it was expected. But not everyone is convinced. In informal conversations, some people admitted they joined the cleanups out of fear of being singled out if they stayed home. Others complained that certain areas received far more attention than others, usually the ones that would look better on camera. In the poorer outskirts, piles of waste still sit untouched, and no brooms have shown up. Then there's the suspicion that participation is quietly tied to political loyalty. In a country with a history of coups and political unrest, public displays of unity can be powerful currency. Was this truly a people's movement, or also a test of who's willing to be seen on the right side of the president's vision? Proponents of the cleanup point to several immediate benefits: fewer mosquito breeding sites, improved market hygiene, and more inviting public spaces that could boost commerce. Clinics in Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso have reported drops in malaria and diarrheal disease cases since stagnant water was cleared. Traders in newly cleaned markets say customers linger longer and buy more. Those are real gains. But how durable are they? Public health improvements tied to environmental cleanup can vanish as quickly as they appear if maintenance slips. Without consistent waste management infrastructure, a single rainy season could undo months of work. The economic impact also comes with questions. While some citizens turned cleanup work into small recycling businesses or temporary jobs, others argue that without systemic changes, like proper waste disposal facilities, long-term funding for sanitation, and urban planning, these benefits are temporary at best. And there's the bigger picture. If communities are expected to handle sanitation entirely on their own, does that let the government off the hook for providing basic services? What starts as empowerment can quietly shift into abdication of responsibility from those in power. The story didn't stay within Burkina Faso's borders for long. Social media platforms lit up with before and after photos, short clips of crowds sweeping, and hashtags like #GreenSaturday. Members of the Burkinabe diaspora in Paris, New York, and Accra began posting their own cleanup efforts in solidarity. Some even live-streamed their events, drawing hundreds of comments praising the movement's spirit. International media picked up the narrative quickly. South African broadcasters hailed it as Africa's clean revolution. Kenyan opinion writers asked pointedly, "If Burkina Faso can do this without foreign aid, what's stopping us?" Delegations from Mali, Niger, and Ghana crossed the border to study the model. But here's the caution. When a story goes global, it often gets streamlined. The messy parts disappear. There's little mention of the neighborhoods left untouched, or the residents who chose not to participate. There's no deep dive into how waste is being disposed of, or whether the cleanup is truly sustainable. The more the story is packaged for export, the more it risks becoming a tidy myth, one that inspires outsiders but glosses over the complex realities on the ground. And once a movement becomes a brand, the pressure to maintain the image can outweigh the work itself. Even at the height of the cleanup wave, dissent never fully went away. Street vendors who had operated makeshift stalls on public walkways for years saw them dismantled, sometimes by neighbors, sometimes by volunteer crews who insisted the space had to be cleared. While official accounts describe these interactions as peaceful, some vendors tell a different story, of losing their livelihood overnight without compensation or alternatives. Then there are the residents who question the priorities. They argue that while sweeping streets is symbolic, it doesn't fix deeper issues like unemployment, unreliable electricity, or limited access to healthcare. For them, the cleanup feels like a distraction from harder systemic reforms. Critics also point out the selective nature of enforcement. In some districts, illegal dumping still goes unpunished. In others, individuals close to local officials seem to be spared from having their structures removed. Such inconsistencies chip away at the claim that the movement is purely citizen-led and equally applied. And perhaps the sharpest criticism comes from those who fear the political undertones. In a nation where loyalty is often tested in public spaces, refusing to participate can be seen as opposition, not just to the movement, but to the leadership itself. That kind of pressure blurs the line between voluntary civic action and a public loyalty display. Every movement looks unstoppable in the first weeks. Energy is high, cameras are rolling, and the novelty keeps people coming back. But history is full of miracle campaigns that fizzled once the excitement wore off. In Burkina Faso, the risk is obvious. Without a formal waste management system, without consistent funding, the clean streets could return to their old state in a single rainy season. Already, some neighborhoods have reported seeing trash pile up again just weeks after their cleanup day. The early enthusiasm was fueled by social pressure. Nobody wanted to be seen as the one who didn't pitch in. But social pressure cuts both ways. Once a few people stop showing up, the chain reaction works in reverse. If Green Saturday becomes optional, it risks becoming symbolic. More about posting a photo than actually maintaining progress. And there's a harder question. If the movement was partly sustained by political momentum, what happens when the political winds change? In a country with a history of abrupt leadership shifts, will the next government keep sweeping, or sweep the whole initiative under the rug? Supporters insist this is a people's revolution, but the optics are too perfect to ignore. A young leader, a country scarred by instability, a dramatic, photogenic turnaround. These are the building blocks of political capital. In public rallies and interviews, President Traoré has linked the cleanup to national dignity and self-reliance. That's a powerful message, especially in a region wary of foreign influence. But it also raises questions. Is this truly about sanitation, or is it about building a political brand? We've seen similar playbooks before, leaders using visible, high-participation projects to cement legitimacy. In some cases, these efforts start as genuine initiatives but are slowly absorbed into political propaganda. The danger is that if the movement becomes too closely tied to one figure, it may collapse if that figure falls from power. Some analysts even suggest the cleanup serves a dual purpose, improving the streets while testing the population's willingness to mobilize quickly on a leader's call. If true, that shifts the story from one of civic pride to one of political rehearsal, a far more complicated legacy than the official narrative suggests. Neighboring countries haven't missed what's happening in Burkina Faso. Delegations from Mali, Niger, and Ghana have crossed the border, not just to praise the movement, but to take notes. On paper, the model is appealing, low cost, high visibility, and able to rally people without waiting for foreign aid. But the regional reaction is cautious. Some officials privately admit they're wary of replicating a movement that puts so much visible power in the hands of ordinary citizens. In states where governments tightly control public mobilization, the idea of mass volunteer action, outside the direct chain of command, can be seen as a threat as much as an opportunity. There's also the aid angle. Many West African nations depend heavily on foreign assistance for infrastructure and sanitation. If citizens start handling these issues themselves, donors could redirect funds elsewhere. That's good for self-reliance, but bad for governments used to those aid flows. It's not hard to see why some leaders might applaud Burkina Faso publicly while hesitating to follow its lead. And within the African Union and ECOWAS circles, some see the campaign less as an environmental story and more as a soft power move, one that boosts Burkina Faso's profile at a time when it's redefining its political alliances. So here we are, a cleaner Burkina Faso, a viral story, and a long list of questions. Was this the birth of a new civic culture, or just a brilliantly staged moment in the spotlight? Did it prove the power of the people, or the power of a leader to orchestrate mass action when it serves his goals? The truth might be somewhere in between. Streets can be swept in a day, narratives can be built in an hour. But changing the underlying systems that let those streets rot in the first place, that takes years, discipline, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. For the people of Burkina Faso, the real test isn't whether they can clean up once. It's whether they can keep cleaning when the cameras are gone, when the political winds shift, when it's no longer fashionable to hold a broom. And for those of us watching from the outside, the challenge is just as sharp. Do we take the story at face value and feel inspired? Or do we keep asking the harder questions about what's really driving it and whether it can last? If this movement is genuine, it could be the start of something remarkable. If it's not, it's still a powerful reminder. The appearance of unity can be as carefully constructed as any public square. So, what do you think? Was this the sound of a nation waking up, or the sweep of a well-timed political brush?